Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Pay Equity, Equal Pay for Equal Work, Affirmative Action webinar. Today our focus is going to be on OFCCP's view of pay equity. The agency continues to conduct in-depth evaluation on compensation and pay equity during the current 2017 compliance reviews or audits. They're looking for issues systemically as well as individual discrimination. This is what they do at the start of a desk audit. You're required to submit your compensation data in Excel format. So your compensation snapshot is what they're looking for. In item 19 of the OFCCP Compliance Review Scheduling Letter, there's a list of 19 items that you have to submit. This is item 19 on that letter, and I'll show you a copy of what that letter looks like. This is the typical scheduling letter. If you were to receive one of these, it will have an address in here, the name of the company and an address. And then the letter goes on to explain what the compliance officers are looking for, and then on item 19 it explains to you what they're looking for in compensation. Employee level compensation data for all employees, including but limited to full-time, part-time, contract, per diem, and so on. So as we look at this, we recognize that they're looking for a lot of information, and they are going to study it looking for both systemic discrimination and individual discrimination. There is a pay equity task force that has been set up starting at the federal level with the federal agencies, the state agencies, and the city agencies. And they are communicating one with another. So if you have a notice of discrimination at the federal level, you can be pretty sure that the state or city agencies would receive a copy of that notice. I'm going to go into the compensation analysis pay equity detail. So when we're looking at this, we notice when we get into writing affirmative action plans and looking at the compensation data that most companies don't intend to discriminate. They'll even say to us, we don't really need to review our compensation. We don't discriminate. So when you look at your data, if you don't discriminate, then there should be no issues. But most of the time when we look at the issues, we look at them case by case on a case-by-case basis. We're looking for a measurable difference in compensation on the basis of sex, race, and or ethnicity. So it can be just female versus male. It might be race, minority versus non, or individual race categories, black versus Hispanic, Hispanic versus Asian, and so on. The OFCCP compensation evaluations compare wages between males and females, so they're going to look at total comp for males and females, total comp by job categories, and so on, minorities versus non, race versus other race, and ethnic groups. So in order for them to measure, you have to turn in that data. They also compare wages between your job titles and within your EEO categories. So they're looking for employees in similarly situated categories. Then they look within job groups. So some of you have your EEO categories broken down further into similarly situated job groups, especially the larger companies. Then they look at similarly situated employees within job titles. They're looking to see that if you have provided opportunity for advancement, for training and continued education. So you might say, well, he makes more because he took some additional training and education in this particular field, and so we gave him a pay increase upon completion of that. They will come back and ask you, did you provide that training to the other employees that were eligible in this job title? So during the compensation analysis, where your employee data shows indicators of pay inequity, the OFCCP compliance officer will request additional information on policies or procedures and on the categories of jobs or selection within job groups. So this particular slide shows you what a fine would look like. So let's say that the male annual salary in a particular job is $97,000 at the base. The female salary is $89,000. The difference, $8,000. If they decide that this is as a result of discrimination for one reason or another, they take the difference in pay times 2 years, which would be $16,000 in this case, and then the female would get an annual pay increase of $8,000. The OFCCP press release that they would put on the internet showing that the company discriminated against female in compensation, we're going to say that's priceless. So that's something that you would never want to happen. But that is what happens if they give you a notice of discrimination in compensation or pay equity. Your pay equity program should address the latest enforcement OFCCP guidelines. The most recent state equity efforts, so you want to check your state bill on pay equity and include practices to mitigate pay disparity liabilities. Beyond equity, incorporate the benefits of implementing pay equity programs within the organization. This is a report that we do give our companies when we are writing your affirmative action plan. So you can see the female wages are in the gray, the male wages are in the blue. In this case, this is done by EEO category. So the 9 is the service worker, 8 is the laborer, 7 operative, 6 is a craft worker, 5 is an admin. Now you see where a lot of the females fall under the admin support worker, and they do not have any males in that particular category. But you can see that the females fall below the line across the board except for a couple instances. So we instantly know that we have somewhat of an issue here. Then we have category 4. These are our sales workers. So sometimes these individuals are compensated with a base pay and then a commission program. They will question you on your commission program. They want to know, does everybody have the same commission package set up, or are they different, and why are they different? Then 3s are technicians, 2s are your professionals, 1B are managers, and 1A are executives. Typical compensation plans are based on market data or job ranking. The third one is a point factor method. The first, a market based on job and market data, are less complex. They're the most commonly used, and they are not as defendable as the point factor method. Most complex, used infrequently, and most defendable program is the point factor method. So this means that this takes a lot of time, takes a lot of work to do this, and if you are a multi-state company, sometimes you have to really look at your demographics and all of that to include it in this plan. So this is what we use. You take the knowledge, experience, job complexity, supervision, errors, contact with others, confidentiality level, attention to visual demand, working conditions, character of supervision, and scope of supervision. So this is just an example. You put all this together and you put point factors or value factors to each. So your point factor method would do this for every job title, and then you add values to each of those sections. So if you're interested in a compensation program, please contact Service 1 and they would have someone contact you. The OFCCP compliance officer's compensation interview is another thing we want to talk about here. So as they're going through your compensation, it's important to remember that anything that you say during your interview, they will use against you. So those of you that are on the line that have been audited, you know that this is true. So they continue to use their compensation interview tool in the 2017 audit. Because what they're trying to figure out is, what is your pay practice? How do you pay? And then according to the way that you pay, they will then use your responses against you when they do the analysis. Some of the companies on the line have unions in place. So you have more than one compensation program. You've got a collective bargaining agreement, but you also may have a pay program for your sales workers with a commission program, and then you may have another one for hourly employees and another one for your executives and managers. So a lot of you are going to have multiple ways that you pay, and they will ask about all of those because they want to find out how you pay. Once they find out how you pay, then they go further to investigate your data. So let's look at this. Interview can last anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. So they usually always ask, what factors are considered in setting wages? And then you can answer those as you're taking a look at this slide. You might want to think about this. Jot down what you do, and are you consistent in your process according to the answers that you're giving yourself. Who determines the salary ranges for each job? How do you set pay rates? How do you determine pay at hire? How do you determine pay at promotion? How do you determine pay increases or cost of living increases? Do you include merit increases? Do you attach them to your performance review? Do the managers understand the metrics in the performance review evaluation process? Next, how do you determine pay, bonus, and incentive structures? And how is it determined who receives overtime and who does not? So these are all sample questions of the OFCCP compensation interview. The OFCCP is going to ask for factors that you say explain your pay practices. They're going to assess you on your interview responses. So let's say that you say you use pay grades and ranges and you're consistent, but you have employees that are not paid the same. They're going to want to know why. Now and again, we do see companies that have pay grades and they're pretty strict with them, but there'll be a wrong pay grade in the HRIS system. So you want to do some self-audits and look for those types of inconsistencies. If you tell the compliance officer that you're using grades and ranges in your compensation program, they're going to test your program and see how you've created your process. So look up the employee detail in the job titles that have been adversely affected and evaluate why they are paid less. So we're going to take a look at some real data in a minute, and I want to go through it and show you how we recommend you take a look at compensation factors. So they're looking for inconsistencies, or are females paid less than males, males paid less than females, minorities paid more, non-minorities paid more, and so on. So the reasons that you may have commonly could be tenure with the company. So people that have been with the company longer are usually paid more because they've had more opportunity for pay increases. Maybe tenure in the job. So in our last webinar, we discussed in some of our record-keeping violations, the job date is oftentimes missing or not kept. So you need to produce the tenure in the job. That's the job date. The tenure with the company is the original hire date. The tenure in the job is the date that they started in the new job. So we're going to look at some data and we'll take a look at that. So you need to collect the tenure in the job, or the job date. The employee was promoted, but the job title was not changed in the HRIS system. This is common. We see this all the time. Well, this isn't the right job title for this person. The only reason we would know what the job title is on our data is because you turned it into us. So whatever you're turning into us, or your consultant or law firm, the only reason they have that title is because you turned it in. So you want to do a self-audit again. Then again, has the employee been demoted due to a reorganization, but their compensation rate was not decreased? Now, this is a very common instance. And someone maybe they were promoted to a supervisor, it didn't work out, so they went back to their hourly position, but their compensation rate was not decreased, and it results in pay inequity as compared to their cohorts. This is something that is usually acceptable to the OFCCP if they understand, but they may want to see the background change reports showing the promotion and then the demotion and the dates. They want to know many times the time and the wage or the grade range if you use grades and ranges in your comp program. They will look for shift differentials and ask you, is the shift differential, which may be a dollar amount or a percentage on top of the base rate, is it included in the base rate or is it on top of the base rate? A shift differential may be the reason why you have pay inequity between shift 1, shift 2, or shift 3. Let's say that you have no females in shift 2 or shift 3. Are you funneling females to the lower paying shift and males to the higher paying shift? Have the females been given an opportunity to work shift 2 and shift 3 so that they can make more money? Is the title correct? Do you have generic titles? Do you need to expand your titles? Do your titles explain what the employee is really doing? Are your performance review points influencing merit raises? That means you have a metrics in your performance review. So maybe someone receives a 5% increase if they have an excellent performance review. If it is good or medium, they receive a 3%. And if it's poor or not or below standard, they would receive 1% or 0. If that is the case and the merit raises are attached to performance reviews, the OFCCP will ask you for performance review scores, and they'll ask them for more than 1 year. So they will go back into previous years and ask you for performance review scores, and they may tie those into the merit increases along the way. So you need to be really careful that your documentation is done well and that the managers understand how to use the point system and how to use the metrics. They will ask you for disciplinary actions or warnings in a personnel file. So if you say, well, this employee did not receive a merit increase because they had disciplinary actions or warnings, they will want to see documentation of those actions or warnings. If you tell them that the reason they didn't get pay increases is due to excessive absenteeism, they will want to see documentation of that. Sometimes they will come on site and interview the employees to find out what's really happening. If a person has been on leave of absence, FMLA, or military leave for a period of time, it's a possibility that they may have missed a cost of living increase, a performance review tied to a metrics where there would be an increase in there. If they have been out of work and they have been on leave and they have missed one of those pay raises, make sure that's documented, because you need to, if you say this is the reason, then you have to back it up with documentation. Let's say that you say, well, we pay this employee more because they have a master's and these others only have a bachelor's. Is the higher level of education job-related and there's a business necessity? Is it something that's valuable to the company? So again, it goes back to that point factor. What do you value and what are you willing to pay for and why? Let's say that the employee has a higher level of experience, and it might be from a prior employer. It might be from another site in your corporation, but they do have more experience than their cohorts, and maybe you're willing to pay more for that. You have to document that level of experience. Okay, so maybe an employee's start rate of pay was higher or lower than the other employees, and this one is a common problem. If you had an employee start at a higher rate, so the manager offered him more at higher, you have to explain why. So remember, one of the questions the compliance officer is going to ask you in the interview is, how do you set pay rates at higher? So if one receives a higher pay rate at the beginning when they're hired, you have to justify that and say why. Now, it could be one of these other reasons above, maybe a higher level of education, maybe a higher level of experience, but you should have a parameter. You should have the highest rate you're going to go or the lowest. So you should have some sort of a range in there, even though if it is not a formal range, you should have a range at which you will stop at the top of the range. Now, what if an employee is a relative? Are you going to say, well, we're going to pay them higher because they're related to the CEO? If you don't have some kind of a reason in place besides that reason, that can cause you problems. At the end of the discussion, and you're looking for the employee that with compensation you cannot defend. If you, when you are doing that research, find someone that you cannot defend, do they need a pay increase? If they need a pay increase, should that adjustment be retroactive? Should it go back to January 1st, 2017 or further? Should any employee have a title change? So you want to look at all of that. Are their dates correct? Do you need to update your HRIS system? Do you have your job dates in there correctly? This is a policy statement, and the OFCCP will hold you to your words. Now, most companies have an EEO policy statement that looks similar to this, and it says that you'll give equal opportunity for all applicants and employees in recruiting, hiring, placement, training, compensation, and benefits, etc. So when you say this in your policy statement, even though you may not have a compensation policy, you do have a policy statement that includes compensation. So you need to be careful because they will hold you to your words, and so will your employees. So compensation is tied to all of these policies. It's tied to your equal opportunity affirmative action reaffirmation letter language, to your hiring policy and steps to the hiring process, to your training policy, to your compensation policy and benefits, and to your termination policy and progressive discipline. OFCCP will often ask for copies of these policies, and if you don't have the policy, you should at least have a procedure in place. One of those policies that people often don't have is a compensation policy, and that's okay. You're not required to have one. If you do have one, you need to stick to it. You need to use it and stick to your policy and be consistent. If you have a compensation policy in place and you are not sticking to it or being consistent with it, or your managers are not, then do not turn it into the OFCCP. Do not turn in a written policy that you are not consistently using or that your managers do not understand. That's the same with your promotion policy. Because compensation is attached to promotion, don't turn in a policy if you're not consistently using it. And that's the same for your other policies. These are systemic cases that the OFCCP are examples of an OFCCP audit. is one that shows a measurable pattern of a discrimination based in part on statistical evidence. B, a case that shows a practice applicable to multiple applicants or employees that results in discrimination. So this is an example on pay practices. Could be a company that categorizes all employees as exempt because they do not want to pay overtime. And for some reason, exempt seems to be a status thing with some employees. So that means that they don't make overtime. You can have an exempt plus overtime status if that is applicable to the title and the way that the IRS has it set up. This can also set you up for back pay of overtime wages, which can be very expensive, and it can grow into a class action lawsuit. So you've got some pretty big exposure here. So you want to be really careful about exempt versus non-exempt. Our example here is funneling females to lower paying jobs and males to higher paying jobs. This practice may or may not be intentional or premeditated, but it can result in pay inequity. There can be a presumption that females like certain jobs and males like other types of jobs. So females usually don't like dirty jobs where they get dirty and they're in the machine area and they are getting their hands dirty. Is that a presumption? So I see all kinds of manufacturing companies with lots of females working what we call dirty jobs, and they're very happy with their jobs. So it is a presumption that females like certain jobs and males like other types of jobs. We're going to take a look at some data and take a look at the data integrity in these data samples. So your affirmative action plan statistical analysis must be backed up by reliable data. So what we're recommending is if you conduct a quarterly self-audit or at least twice a year. You want to look for missing data, inconsistent data, errors, and red flags. So let's take a look at our sample company data, and this is what we call our snapshot. And when you collect data, if you're not using employers group, most of your law firms or other consulting firms will collect similar data. So we have the last name, first name, the race, the sex. This is the annual base rate that the employee would make. This is their job title. And this is how we recommend you look at this. So this over here is the EEO code in the job group. This is the hire date. Are they full-time, part-time, exempt, or non-exempt? So this is an example of pay data that you would hand into the OFCCP. And then they would want a lot more than this. But I just want to give you an example of how to do your self-audit. The first thing we've done here is we've taken our snapshot data of our sample company. We go and we say data sort. We want to sort it by the job title A to Z. And then in addition, we want to sort it by the hire date, oldest to newest. Why? Because people that have been there longer should be paid more if they've gone through pay increases through the years. So we say, okay, so our data starts with our account executives. We have 4 account executives here. We have 2 males. We have 2 females. We have 3 non-minorities, 1 minority. S is more than 1 race. We can see that the people here that have been there a little bit longer are paid a little bit more, but this female right here is paid less. Why is she paid less? So we go over here, we look at her hire date. She's been there a couple years longer than this other female here, but she is definitely paid less. So we're going to make a question here. Make your question simple as you're going through, because you may need to go, as you're going through this, you're going to want to go back and go back to her records in your HRIS system or in her file and find out, why is she paid less than her cohorts? Because maybe she has a different, because these are account executives, these are probably commissioned people. Maybe she has a different commission program, but she definitely has more tenure than this individual, and she's paid less. Now here's an accounting clerk, AP and AR. Yes, those are different positions. They have different hire dates here, and you can see that the AP clerk is a new hire. The AR clerk has been there for 10 years. So why is the AR clerk making less? Is the job that different? So this particular employee should probably be making more. This is the non-minority female. So they're both females, so there is not a measure of discrimination there, but they are different races. So when there is a difference in race and or gender, you need to be able to answer why one is making more than another. Now we're going to come down here. Here's an example of some discrepancies in data. These are assistant supervisor in the shop. We can say that the Hispanic male makes $62,000, the white male makes $86,000. Definitely a difference. The Hispanic male has a hire date of 97, the white male has a hire date of 07. So why is the Hispanic male being paid less? According to this job title, they do the same job, and that's how the compliance officer is going to see it. They also have a different EEO category. That's not correct. You have to have the same EEO category for the title. The title can't have multiple EEO categories. Are they titled wrong? That's the first thing you want to ask. What are they really doing? Then we look over here. One's exempt, one's not exempt. One is eligible for overtime and one is not. Why is that? Is one on a bonus program? They're supervisors, and one is not. So there's something happening here with these two employees. They're both male, so it's not gender, but there is a race difference. So in this particular case, we would want to take a look at this file and find out, number one, are they titled correctly? Are our dates correct? We want to correct this right here if they're doing the same job, and then we want to say, why is one person paid more than the other? Okay, so we put our question in there so we can go back. Now you may know right off the cuff, you may know immediately that this individual was hired, but then they left and they were rehired and they came back. In that case, you would need a job date in here. So you would need to be able to prove that with paperwork to the OFCCP. So maybe that this person is actually not an assistant shop supervisor. Maybe they're the shop supervisor or even the manager, and the job title was not changed. But there's some reason for this discrepancy. This is what we're asking you to do in your self-audit. Now we come down a little bit further here, and we see that we have this CNC operator, and this is a computer machine, and they're the operator of the machine, and they're an operator 1. So all of these people are all operator 1s. They're, according to their job title, they are all working on the same job at the same level. Well, why is this person making so much more than the others? Why is he making more than his cohorts? We see that his hire date over here is somewhat similar, 07. So he should be making more. So this may be an instance where he's really a lead. Maybe he was a supervisor and he was demoted back to an operator 1, but we don't really know. So we put our question in there and we do our study and come back. So we're going to look for some more inconsistencies here. This is a manufacturing company, as you can kind of tell by these titles. Okay, so here's a problem down here. We've got these engineers, and so these are all professionals. There's a manufacturing engineer 1, 2, and 3. We have 1 female. We have 3 Asians, 2 non-minorities, and we have one black, and we have one Hispanic. So they're going to compare all of these one to the other, and they're going to want to know why they're paid differently. Well, the manufacturing engineer one has been there longer, and this is probably something with higher level skill, maybe higher level education. So you can think about your employees, but they are going to compare these one to another. Then we see that the manufacturing engineer one is exempt, so they don't make overtime. Manufacturing engineer 3 is exempt. Why are the manufacturing engineer 2s non-exempt? So we see this all the time, and you'll say, well, you know, they don't make overtime, it's just a mistake in the system. But you can't have data mistakes when you're turning it into the federal government. So you want to make sure you've done an audit on your exempt versus non. So why are these listed non? So the fact of the matter is that if they're listed non-exempt and they're making overtime, the government would be happy. It's the ones that are exempt that should not be exempt. That's where you have a problem. And you could end up owing the employee back wages for overtime. The other issue that we see, and this comes up in accommodations, if you have an automatic overtime where employees they're scheduled for overtime, and other employees are not, they may want to know, why did you schedule this group for overtime and this group no? And you want to make sure that your minorities and females are not set up for not having overtime. It also can spill over into individuals with disabilities or disabled vets. Are you not giving your disabled employees opportunity to make overtime? So you want to be really careful. Now the flip side of this is, what if someone doesn't want or cannot work overtime? Do they have the opportunity to decline as an accommodation? So you want to make sure you've covered both sides of that coin. All right, so if they are able to volunteer for overtime, then that is another story, but you need that documented. So that goes back to your compensation process. What is your overtime pay process, and do they volunteer for it, or are they scheduled for overtime? So you want to make sure you have that documented. Okay. I think we've covered a lot of this. You notice that I have color-coded females over here in purple, males in gray. Color code your system, make sure that you can compare. So within a job, you want to be compared females versus males, and then your non-minorities versus minorities, and your individual minority categories. In addition, you want to make sure that you have the right job titles. You want to add a job date in here. So you add your job date so you can be sure that you can track how long this individual has been in this job. So maybe this person didn't start out in this job, or maybe they started out part-time, or maybe they started out as a temp, but there's some reason why they're making less. So this job rate is really important for you to collect. So in your data analysis, as you're scrubbing your data, you must include your executive wage rates. If you are in a position where you're not allowed to have access to executive wage rates, then the person that handles executive compensation needs to make sure that they have double-checked their data. If you get into what's called a glass ceiling review and they look at your compensation, they will look at executive rates looking from the top down. So you want to make sure that you include all of those. Review your exempt versus non-exempt codes. Review your commission sales managers' base rates. We find various rates for sales individuals, and sometimes it's based on the total amount of accounts they have. It can be based on the scope of the area. It can be based on the degree of difficulty of particular accounts. So some of you that are in the aerospace industry, you have some accounts that can be extremely difficult and others that may be less difficult. That also goes with your buyers and those that are doing purchasing. Some of those jobs are more difficult and they require more knowledge, skill, and ability to do them. So you know what those jobs are. You might want to put a differential built into your job title so you can explain the differences. If they are truly different jobs, we suggest that you update those job titles to reflect that they're doing something different. Be able to explain your commission packages inside and out, because they sometimes will come and interview those employees. Look for incorrect job titles. Are your job titles too generic? Are your EEO classifications correct? And are they consistent? Are any of your titles outdated? So what we mean by that is, do they reflect current technology in a lot of areas? So you might have outdated job titles that are no longer even used, and so you want to take a look at those and update those. And then if you have a union and you have titles that are not politically correct or gender neutral, you may want to renegotiate those when your next union negotiation comes up. And we do see this now and again. An example would be workman or warehouse man. Those sometimes loader dock man. So we see those all the time with unions, and they'll say, well, we can't change them because they're union titles. So flag it when you do have a union negotiation to renegotiate those titles into something that is more gender neutral. We want to talk a little bit about the 2018 EEO1 survey filing. The EEOC has moved the deadline from September 30th to March 31st, 2018. So the good news is that there is no EEO1 report due in 2017. The EEO1 report that is due March 31st, 2018 can be filed on or before March 31st, 2018. It will include only race, ethnicity, and gender information. There will be no pay data due, and there will be no hours worked reported. So we will be filing the 2018 EEO1 reports. If you would like us to file your reports, please contact us for a proposal. We did say that we would not file them because of the compensation data due and the exposure there to the compensation. So at this point, we will file them, and it does not. This report does not include pay data or hours worked. So if you have questions regarding your affirmative action program, or you would like a proposal from us, you can contact one of us. I'm Suzanne Oliva. I'm the senior manager. Eva is a plan writer. Michelle is a plan writer. Any of us can help you. If you want questions on compensation programs, Service 1 can help you.